In northeastern Utah, there is a stretch of land where the desert does not feel empty. It feels watched. For decades, people have reported lights moving silently across the sky. Creatures standing in fields where no creature should be. Cattle found dead under circumstances that never seem to make sense. Voices in empty rooms. Shadows outside windows. Objects that appeared, vanished, and left behind nothing but fear. This place has been called many things. A paranormal hotspot. A UFO laboratory. A government mystery. A hoax. A curse. But most people know it by one name: Skinwalker Ranch. And the deeper you look into the story, the stranger it becomes. Because this is not just a ghost story. It is not just a UFO story. It is not just a cryptid story. It is all of those things at once. And that may be the most disturbing part. Tonight we go into the Uintah Basin, to the locked gates, the dark ridge lines, and the ranch nobody can explain. This is the story of Skinwalker Ranch. Welcome to Legends and Lore, where reality and the unexplained collide. Some places become legends because of one terrible event: a murder, a disappearance, a haunting. But Skinwalker Ranch is different. Its reputation comes from accumulation. Not one story, dozens, maybe hundreds. Lights in the sky, monsters in the fields, disembodied voices, invisible forces, government programs, scientific instruments behaving strangely, witnesses who insist something happened, skeptics who say the evidence never rises above rumor, and a question that still hangs over the land: what is really happening there? Skinwalker Ranch sits in the Uintah Basin of northeastern Utah. It is a place of wide sky, dry earth, distant mountains, and long horizons. By day, the landscape can look almost peaceful, rugged, open, beautiful in the hard way that desert country is beautiful. But at night, the same openness becomes something else. There are fewer places to hide, fewer lights to soften the dark. The sky feels enormous. And when something moves out there, your eye follows it. When something flashes over a ridge, you notice. When an animal screams in the distance, the sound carries. The ranch itself was once better known as Sherman Ranch, named for the family whose reports helped launch it into modern legend. But the broader Uintah Basin already had a reputation before the ranch became famous. For years, people in the region had reported strange aerial lights, unusual animals, and experiences that did not fit neatly into ordinary categories. Then, in the 1990s, the Sherman family moved onto the property. And according to the legend, the ranch did not wait long before making itself known. When Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased the ranch in the 1990s, they were not buying a tourist attraction. They were buying land, a home, a place to raise cattle, a place to live. But almost immediately, according to their accounts, strange things began to happen. One of the most famous stories involves an animal that looked like a wolf. Not a normal wolf. Something larger, heavier, wrong. The story says the animal approached the family calmly, even letting itself come close enough to be seen clearly. Then it attacked a calf. Terry Sherman reportedly fired at it once, then again, then again. The bullets should have dropped it. But according to the story, the animal did not react the way a living animal should. It did not fall. It did not bleed in any obvious way. It simply moved away, as if bullets were an inconvenience. Later, the Shermans reportedly found a strange track, much larger than expected. That story became one of the first defining images of Skinwalker Ranch. a predator that looked like an animal, but did not behave like one. And from there, the claims multiplied. Strange lights appeared in the sky. Blue orbs, orange spheres, silent craft, glowing objects that seemed to move with intention. The family reported seeing shapes in the air that opened like windows or portals. They described animals disappearing, equipment failing, voices, footsteps, figures watching from the edge of sight, and cattle deaths that seemed too strange to dismiss, but too bizarre to explain. This is where Skinwalker Ranch becomes difficult to classify. If it were only lights in the sky, it would be a UFO story. If it were only strange animals, it would be a cryptid story. If it were only voices and footsteps, it would be a haunting. But the Sherman accounts seem to include everything, as if every category of the unexplained had been dropped onto one piece of land. And that is why the ranch became famous. Not because one impossible thing happened, but because too many impossible things seem to happen in the same place. Before we go further, we need to talk about the name, Skinwalker. It is a word many paranormal shows and internet stories use casually now, but the word comes from Navajo tradition, where it refers to a kind of harmful witch believed to have the ability to transform or disguise itself. That belief is not a campfire gimmick. It is part of a living culture, and many native people do not treat it as entertainment. That matters, because Skinwalker Ranch is not in the Navajo Nation. It borders Ute land. The ranch's reputation became tangled with native folklore over time, but that does not mean every strange thing reported there should be reduced to a single borrowed word. So in this episode, we are going to use the name because it is the name the ranch became known by. But we are not going to pretend we can fully explain or own the cultural belief behind it. The modern legend of Skinwalker Ranch is a mixture of ranching history, UFO lore, cryptid stories, native adjacent rumor, media attention, private investigation, government interest, and speculation. That mixture is powerful. It is also messy, and sometimes messy is where legends are born. The strange thing is that many reports from the ranch do not sound like traditional Skinwalker stories at all. They sound like UFO encounters, or poltergeist cases, or mutilation reports, or psychological hauntings, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the name became a container, a way to hold everything people could not explain. Lights, creatures, fear, bad luck, invisible forces. The land had a name, and once it had a name, the stories had somewhere to gather. If there is one image that defines the Uintah Basin, it may be the light in the sky. Not stars, not airplanes, something stranger. People in the region have described glowing orbs moving low over the ground. Objects that appear suddenly, hover silently, then vanish. Lights that plunge toward water. Lights that move too fast. Lights that seem to respond to being watched. Of course, strange lights are not automatically alien. The sky is full of things people misidentify. Aircraft, satellites, meteors, military activity, weather phenomena, reflections, drones. And the human brain is very good at turning an uncertain shape into a story. But the Skinwalker Ranch reports are not just interesting because people saw lights. They are interesting because of how those lights connect to everything else. A light appears. Then animals panic. A glowing orb crosses a field. Then something is found dead. A bright object hovers near the ridge. Then equipment fails. The pattern is what makes people uneasy. Not one light. Not one sound. Not one event. The pattern. To believers, the ranch seems to behave like a system. as if the lights, creatures, voices, and physical effects are all parts of the same phenomenon. To skeptics, that is exactly the danger. When a place becomes famous for weirdness, every weird thing gets pulled into the same story. A light becomes evidence. A dead animal becomes evidence. A malfunctioning camera becomes evidence. A feeling becomes evidence. And once the legend is strong enough, the land itself becomes a filter. Everything that happens there feels meaningful, even when it might not be. By the mid-1990s, the stories from the Sherman Ranch had attracted attention far beyond Utah. One of the people who became interested was Robert Bigelow, a wealthy businessman with a long-standing interest in the paranormal and unexplained. Bigelow founded the National Institute for Discovery Science, often called NIDS. The idea was to study unusual phenomena more seriously than casual ghost hunters or weekend UFO groups. In 1996, Bigelow purchased the ranch, and with that, Skinwalker Ranch entered a new phase. It was no longer only a family's frightening experience. It became a kind of private paranormal laboratory. Investigators reportedly monitored the land. They collected witness accounts. They watched for lights. They investigated animal deaths. They tried to bring some kind of structure to a place defined by chaos. But there was a problem. The ranch did not perform on command. That is one of the most frustrating things about cases like this. If something happens only when cameras fail, only when instruments are pointed the wrong way, only when the right person happens to look up at the right second, how do you study it? How do you separate phenomenon from folklore? Signal from noise? Evidence from story? NIDS reportedly gathered many accounts, but skeptics have long argued that the publicly available evidence has never matched the size of the claims. And that is the central tension of Skinwalker Ranch. The story is enormous. The proof is elusive. Again and again, people say something happened. Again and again, the hard evidence seems to slip away, which either means there is nothing there, or it means that whatever is there does not want to be measured. And that second possibility is why people keep coming back. Skinwalker Ranch became even more intriguing when its story began to overlap with government interest in unidentified aerial phenomena. This is where the names become confusing. AAWSAP, AATIP, DIA, Bigelow Aerospace, defense funding, special access program requests. For years, the public heard rumors about secret government UFO studies. Then reporting and official releases confirmed that a Defense Intelligence Agency-managed program called AAWSAP existed in the late 2000s and early 2010s. The official purpose was not go hunt ghosts on a ranch. It was to investigate future aerospace threats and unconventional technologies. But Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies was involved as a contractor, and the broader orbit of people connected to the program had ties to Skinwalker Ranch research. This gave the ranch a new kind of mythology. Now it was not just people saw strange things. It became people saw strange things, and the government may have taken it seriously. That changes the emotional weight of the story, because when a neighbor says they saw a light, you may shrug. When a rancher says something killed his cattle, you may wonder. But when government money, defense programs, and aerospace contractors enter the picture, people start asking different questions. What did they know? What did they find? What was classified? What was ignored? What was exaggerated? And what was quietly filed away? But here too, we have to be careful. Official documents confirm government programs and contracts. They do not prove that aliens, portals, monsters, or demons were haunting the ranch. That distinction matters. Government interest is not the same as government proof. Sometimes governments study strange reports because they are extraordinary. Sometimes they study them because they might involve foreign technology. Sometimes they study them because powerful people are interested. And sometimes they study them because no one wants to be the person who ignored something that later turned out to matter. Skinwalker Ranch lives in that gray zone. Not confirmed, not dismissed, just strange enough to survive. The hardest thing about Skinwalker Ranch is that it refuses to be one kind of mystery. With the Bell Witch, you can ask, was it a haunting? With Roswell, you can ask, was it a crashed object? With Bigfoot, you can ask, is there an unknown animal? But Skinwalker Ranch does not let you ask one clean question. It forces you to ask all of them. What do we do with reports of massive wolves that do not fall when shot? What do we do with glowing orbs that seem to move intelligently? What do we do with cattle mutilations? What do we do with voices in empty spaces? What do we do with people who claim the activity followed them home? What do we do with equipment failures, radiation claims, magnetic anomalies, strange injuries, and sightings that sound impossible even before they sound paranormal? There are theories, plenty of them. Some say the ranch is a window area, a place where different realities or dimensions overlap. Some say it is a portal. Some say extraterrestrials. Some say military testing. Some say psychological contagion. Some say folklore plus media hype. Some say fraud. Some say the land is cursed. And some people, especially skeptics, say Skinwalker Ranch is a perfect example of what happens when a place becomes famous for being mysterious. Every strange thing becomes part of the myth. Every blurry image becomes suggestive. Every missing detail becomes suspicious. Every lack of proof becomes somehow proof of something hiding. That skeptical argument is strong, but it does not fully erase the unease, because people still report things. People still claim experiences, and the ranch still has a way of pulling serious people into strange conversations. Scientists, security guards, ranchers, journalists, military-adjacent researchers, believers, skeptics, debunkers, all circling the same question. What is happening there? So what is Skinwalker Ranch? Theory 1. It is exactly what believers say it is. A paranormal hotspot. A place where the veil is thin, where UFOs, cryptids, spirits, and unknown intelligences are different faces of the same phenomenon. This theory explains the variety by saying the variety is the point. Maybe the ranch is not haunted by one thing. Maybe it is being visited by something that can appear in many forms. Theory 2. It is an extraterrestrial or interdimensional site. The lights, portals, strange beings, and odd physical effects could be signs of technology so advanced that it appears supernatural. This theory is popular because it connects the ranch to the broader UAP mystery, but it also requires a leap, a big one. Theory 3. It is military or experimental activity. Strange lights, electromagnetic effects, odd injuries, and secrecy could point to classified testing. That explanation may sound grounded, but it still leaves questions. Why this ranch? Why these reports? Why the creature sightings? And why would experimental activity produce decades of folklore? Theory 4. It is a psychological and cultural feedback loop. A place gets a reputation. People arrive expecting the strange. They interpret ambiguous events through that expectation. Media amplifies the best stories. Each retelling makes the ranch more powerful. The legend grows until the ranch is no longer just a place. It becomes a machine for producing meaning. Theory 5. It is a mixture. And that may be the most realistic answer. Maybe there were misidentified lights. Maybe there were animal attacks. Maybe there were exaggerations. Maybe some witnesses were sincere but mistaken. Maybe some stories were shaped by media and belief. Maybe some data was overinterpreted. And maybe, inside all of that, there are still a few events that do not sit comfortably in any ordinary explanation. That is where Skinwalker Ranch lives. Not in proof, not in certainty, but in residue, the leftover details, the stubborn accounts, the things that remain after the easy answers have done all they can. Skinwalker Ranch is not frightening because we know what it is. It is frightening because we do not. If it is all folklore, then it shows how powerfully a story can transform land into legend. If it is a hoax, then it is one of the most successful paranormal legends of the modern age. If it is misinterpretation, then it reveals how easily darkness, distance, fear, and expectation can shape reality. But if even a fraction of the reports are true, if something really moves across those fields, if something really watches from the ridgeline, if something really appears in the sky and vanishes without sound, then Skinwalker Ranch may be one of the strangest places in America. Not because it gives us answers, but because it keeps asking questions. And maybe that is what the ranch does best. It waits. It watches. It lets you decide you do not believe. And then, somewhere in the dark above the basin, a light appears where no light should be. I'm David, and this has been Legends and Lore. Tell me what you think. Is Skinwalker Ranch a paranormal hotspot, a government mystery, or one of the greatest modern legends ever built? Until next time, keep your lantern lit, and don't follow strange lights into the dark.